Hey everybody, welcome to Pale in Comparison, a proud member of the Doof Network. In this podcast, my sister uses her knowledge of the Otherverse to take a look at Pact, the only Wildbow web serial shorter than the Bible, and I try to not give away any spoilers. I'm Jenny, and Malia convinced me to read Worm.
I'm Malia, and Jenny convinced me to read everything else. This episode, we are covering Subordination, chapters 6.9 and 6.10. Before we get into that, however, I'd like to issue a spoiler warning. This podcast is filled with pale spoilers. If you don't know what Kennet above, Kennet below, and Kennet found Kennet are, and don't want us to tell you, stop now, read Pale, and come back to this podcast. As for Pact, there will be full spoilers to the chapters we are covering.
All right, I've got a chapter summary that's kind of long, so I'm going to get into it. Blake and his cabal plan on what to do next. He questions Maggie. She denies anything nefarious. Blake has a bad nightmare, after which Evan and Rose try to comfort him. The next day, or after he wakes up, I guess, Isadora shows up and tells Blake that she will attack him the next day, and that Rose is going to take over when he dies. After going back inside, Blake more or less explains his fate to the others. Vel ends up showing Blake an escape hatch to the spirit world. They all go over the plan, and then they start the plan. Some people end up going to the spirit world. They go to the police station and start to wreak havoc with the Bahames. What did you think of these chapters, Malia?
Well, I think that my prediction that Blake is going to die in this book is stronger now.
Starting to seem pretty solid, I guess.
Yeah. I'm glad I predicted it before Isadora was straight up just like,
you're going to die.
You're going to die. Yeah. I have hope, but you know.
We will see. We'll keep on seeing. All right. So Blake and his friends basically plan what to do next. Blake feels bad as Vel points out a loophole with Conquest's promise to keep the city safe. And then he ends up questioning Maggie about her motives.
Yeah, this is a lot. I guess first I talked about Joel in my notes. Joel's back.
He's back!
It was nice that it felt like he kind of dropped out of the story, and even Goosh gets a line of like, Goosh was at her apartment, and so that was nice just hearing like they're not just
like written off.
Gone. Yeah. But also he's just like, this is upsetting.
Like, yeah.
And he's like, where are the other people? Like, this sucks. And I'm like, yeah. It's kind of nice having Joel as like a scale of, oh yeah, this shit's not normal, but also this is the shit Blake is dealing with, and he kind of just needs to do it or something. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
But yes, there's a lot of like world building and lessons in this chapter, even stuff that I wasn't sure has explicitly been mentioned in Pale. But one of the first big ones was, like magic has a price, but it's not always the practitioner who pays it.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like ideally the karma system would be the thing that ensures that the practitioner does pay the price, but we've seen that that's not true. Sometimes they pay for things that aren't necessarily their fault, and sometimes practitioners can like do shit and then get good karma for it, even if it's like, I don't know, it's just, there's a whole lot of collateral damage here, and it really sucks. And it seems obviously like the Eye is not paying for the things that he's doing, etc. And it's a bummer.
That is a bummer.
Yeah. And we learn more about lords and how lords work. The whole ownership of the city is a one-way relationship, and so Conquest can like get things from the city without having to worry too much about things going the other way or something. And like if Conquest is at war, the city is at war. It's interesting.
Yeah.
But also just like the whole and a mission to protect the city from his underlings is not the same thing as targeting the city. And it's like such bullshit.
Yeah.
On so many levels. It just made me think of the state action doctrine. Yeah, so the state action doctrine is an idea I'm thinking about specifically like human rights law, but also like civil rights law and other things, where in the human rights system, it's countries who are members of that system. And so you need to be able to hold a country accountable, not, just individuals or groups or whatever. It has to be like the fucking country, because those are the people in that system. And in like civil rights law, with the 14th Amendment and various things, you tend to need a government doing the thing. I mean, it's kind of complicated, but that's where a lot of civil rights can be adjudicated, is when like the government violates your rights, not like other people.
Yeah.
And thinking about how, like, number one, if you work for the government and in the scope of your employment, you do something like you commit torts against people, such as exploding their cars and murdering them.
Yeah.
That's state action, right?
Okay.
And there's a question about the scope of employment, right? But like, this is very obviously the scope of employment. Conquest has hired these people to hurt Blake. And that's what they're trying to do. So that's bullshit. And then also I'm thinking particularly human rights law, there's a concept of state action as being state, or like state inaction as state action. If a state is unable or unwilling to stop human rights abuses, the state is liable, right?
Yeah.
You shouldn't just like let people get away with shit in your country and not stop it, is like the idea. So I hate this, and it feels like stupid practitioner bullshit, and is like another instance where our legal system is better than the practitioner system, and it always hurts a little bit when that's true.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I was like, oh, legal corner. We haven't done that in a while.
We haven't done that in a while, so thank you for that. I'm sure people will be excited. Like, they get to learn about things. Woo! Woo! All right.
Yeah. Cool. The all right. I wasn't sure if it was like you wanted to ask something.
No, I just finger snapped at Malia to like let her know if she could keep talking. Just so y'all know what that pause was.
Yeah, we talk about lords a lot. Blake as a lord would be interesting. I mean, just like a diabolist as a lord sounds like a bad idea.
Yes, it does.
Because like, even if like Blake's a good person, he's trying to make the world a better place, and he's not like, oh yes, I'm going to sick my demons on you. It's still like rubbed off on him in a tangible way, and surely would rub off on whatever place he was a lord of, and it sucked. And then I was thinking of like, oh, what if Blake was the lord of some like random podunk area where there like aren't really any people, and that would be fascinating and also suck. And I bet the judges would be super pissed.
Yeah. I think that's reasonable.
Yeah. But I don't know, it just like, I do think that Blake can leave the world a better place. And I believe in him. I think that Blake is a hero, and that he hopefully will continue to be a hero. And hopefully by the time he dies, he'll have made things okay and made the best choices that he could. Yeah, because even Fell here is like, well, I'm glad you're not heartless, but also it sucks that you're not, kind of, because you're letting like the deaths of innocents affect your thinking. And it's just like, yeah. Yeah. The whole like Maggie pipes up and is like, oh, we don't want her to be too heartless because demons. And it's just like, yeah, diabolists are scary.
Yeah. Very true.
And it's interesting that it's still, I don't know, there's like the eye, and the eye is really scary. And there's just like, there's Isadora, like there's all these people and things and powers, and they're all really scary, but it's still like, but demons are the worst. Like, it's still just like, no, demons, that's the one that we don't touch. It's a great way to build it up in the story. And I thought it would kind of be lessened after the Splinter and Poos and all of that, but like Poos isn't like a full demon, and the Splinter is only like kind of a part of a demon or something. And so it's interesting that it's still this big no-go zone.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Maggie.
Yes. Yeah.
I don't know what the fuck Maggie's talking about. Specifically when Blake is like, hey, like, aren't your parents or something gonna like get upset that you're like not home. And she's like, I took measures. And if I explain, like, and those measures are fine and won't inconvenience you, except if I explain now, it will inconvenience you. And I have, like, no idea what the fuck she could be talking about. Because I was like, yeah, connection blockers, but, like, saying, hey, Blake, there are these things you should know about that are really fucking useful. And not that complicated to set up. And I just did that. Like, it seems like it's something else.
I mean, because she doesn't have a lot of background
power,
right?
That too.
Because she has like a binder full of crap, so maybe she didn't have like as neat of connection blockery type things.
Yeah, I mean, well, but Fel's family is an illusionist family, and she has Fel's brother's scrapbook. So it seems like there's probably some decent connection blocking shit.
Maybe it's something else then.
Right.
I don't know. What do you think? Let me know if you have any bold and specific predictions. We will save those, but you just have to remember to hold on to it till the end.
No, I have no fucking clue. I'm like, what? Like, what is it that maybe he could know about later and it's fine, but if he literally knows about it, it's a problem. I guess. So this reminds another law concept. This reminds me of like mens rea.
Mm-hmm.
So mens rea is like the mind of the criminal or some shit. I don't remember what it's. I'm Latin. But so for crime, there has to be like, did you do the thing? And then like, did you have the requisite mental intent to be culpable for the thing? And like those things combined put you into different categories of like whatever offense that we're in. So like the 4 basic criteria going from like least hard to prove to most hard to prove, I guess, is negligence, recklessness, knowledge, and then purpose.
Okay.
And so this almost like this makes me feel like if there's something that has some sort of like knowledge mens rea, Blake not knowing about the thing means that he doesn't have the requisite mental state for this to fuck him over later, but then if he knows about it, it will fuck him over. I can't think of anything immediately in the practice that's a thing with, but
do you think it could
maybe
just be
it's
like
something like that?
It's like it could be something not even that it's like practice related so far, but she knows that he would have a problem with and that it would bother him.
That's true.
But then what would that be? Could just be weird goblin-y things. Your face right now is hilarious.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like so Verona does shit all the time that's kind of like, oh, maybe you shouldn't do that. So maybe it's like or maybe it's like Hermione Granger, like she obliviated her parents and she can undo it, but it feels bad.
It feels bad. It's like morally not that great.
Or something. I don't know.
Well, we'll see if we ever find out.
There are so many things that I still don't understand that I really thought I would know by now, but it's fine.
That's okay.
Yeah, so then they have this like pissing contest where it's like I've seen the 8.
Yeah.
And Blake's like, well, I think the Splinter was maybe a 6, and she's like, I've seen an 8. And I think I agree. I mean, I don't know that she's seen an 8. I don't know how bad it could necessarily get, but I think Maggie went through something worse than what Blake has gone through to this point.
Yeah, it seemed pretty fucking bad.
Right. Because I think like demons obviously have the capacity to be a lot worse. But Pooh's was like fucking with a neighborhood, but the main person really affected was like the host. And everyone else was just like super skeeved out and like on edge, and it was not great. And if he got too powerful, he needed to like run away so that other demons didn't find him and squish him or whatever. And then the Splinter, like fucking horrifying, but also lives in an abandoned factory and doesn't seem to come out. And so it's not like an entire town was like destroyed horrifically. In the same way, obviously, that happened to Maggie. So I do think that the thing that she went through was really, 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 really bad.
Do you think that that's what she's... I mean, this seems like a silly question, but like, do you think that that's what she's talking about, or do you think she's seen something else that could be read even worse? Kind of seems like that's what she's talking about, right? Or
I think that's what she's talking about. I think if any of her fire, blood, whatever things have happened yet, it's Molly's death, but I'm still not sure that qualified. And because she's looking for opportunities to make that happen in a controlled way.
Yeah.
And so no, I still think that that's the worst thing that she's seen. I'm also thinking about things in Pale and like what would they be? Maybe this is a good discussion question or a bad discussion question about just like think of some shit in Pale, and do you think if what happened to Maggie is an 8? You know, like what's the
Either that, or we
milkmaid?
can just discuss that when we get to the Pale and comparison section.
Okay, I like it because like
Let's do
what's
that.
the milkmaid?
All right. Well, let's talk about that at that point.
Yes.
So, you also wrote a note about Fel.
Yeah. Fel's like, hi, I'm gonna go home now. And Blake's like, yeah, I'll let you do that. That sounds like a good idea. And Fel's like, I don't need your permission and you can't stop me. And I think Blake should internalize this a little bit and like let this sink in a little bit more. Was particularly thinking about what he is the way he thinks about Rose. I don't know. I think he's like these people are his quote unquote champions, but also they don't have to do anything for him. But also I just when it comes to Rose, he seems to be thinking about whether or not he's going to allow her to summon things. And I'm like, that's not how this works. Like Rose is a full person and she has power and she has agency. And I don't think you can stop Rose from summoning shit. I think like talking to Rose and being like, I think that this is a good idea or a bad idea, and trying to be like, hey, I really don't want you to do this because it seems like a really bad idea. Can we talk about it? Is one thing, but like Rose does not need Blake's permission to summon John Corvidae. And like that would suck. And obviously she didn't do it. Or not maybe unless he's invisible. That was confusing. But like I think that it would be better if Blake was in a mindset of not, I'm going to control this situation. Because like he brought his friends in and his friends don't know what they're doing. And technically like these people are all sort of like working for him or something. Like he's the one calling all the shots, which is true. But there is a situation where he pushes Rose away and pushes her too far by being like, no, you can't. And then she's like, okay, fuck you, bye. And I don't think that's the best idea.
So I find it really interesting that you say that he's on a power trip, at least in your notes here. That's not the impression that I have. I would I mean, I don't know. Would it be safe to say he just feels an epic amount of responsibility as opposed to just a power trip? Because that's more of my feeling about it.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't say power trip on the podcast because I'm like thinking about it.
I was just reading in your notes because it was like he's kind of on a power trip, so I'm guessing that's kind of like the feeling behind what you're saying.
I mean, I think that later on in the chapter, I didn't really feel that way anymore, and I understood it more. But reflecting on it after not having read the chapter for a week and going back and rereading it, when Fel's like, I don't need your permission to leave, bye. And then thinking about the way he was thinking about Rose, I was like, yeah, he's like controlling everyone, or he's trying to. But also it makes sense because
I mean,
it's his life on the line, and it's his like.
I didn't really read it as him trying to control Fel either. It just kind of seemed kind of like because he was like, I'm not going to stop you. You've helped me to protect people close to me and to be hypocritical to do the same. To me, that's not necessarily a power trip. To me, it doesn't read as like, all right, as the ultimate champion. Well, I guess he's not the champion. Fel's a champion, but like, it just didn't read to me as like, I'm giving you permission. It's more just like, hey, I'm not going to stop you. It's hypocritical if I were to try. But
even bringing that up implies that, I don't know, it like crossed his mind and he thought maybe he ought to give permission. If people were like at my house and helping me move, right? And then somebody was like, yeah, I gotta go. I wouldn't be like, well, I'm not gonna stop you. I'd be like, wow, thank you so much for helping me. Here's pizza. Like, let's hang out. And I guess if it was like we had plans to hang out for the next week straight, or they had plans to come back and help me move again, it'd be like, hey, when do you think you can come back tomorrow? But like literally the whole like, I won't try to stop you from leaving is like,
nah, I mean, fair enough, but I just disagree with you. I think it has more of the energy of someone saying, go for it. Like, and if you're trying to argue like them saying go for it means they were giving permission to leave. That's not what they're saying. But I just don't think we're going to have to agree to disagree there. I just don't think it has the same energy that you seem to think it has. But
yeah, maybe.
And I feel like, like whether it's I wouldn't blame Fel for taking it that way, because Blake has terrible karma anyway, and people seem to take what he says wrong or out of context anyway. But if Fel felt that short about it, I don't think you would have said thank you anyway. um, but that's all right. We can agree to disagree. But that's just my read.
Sure. I do think it's also somewhat of Fel's read, or at least Fel. Maybe it's just Fel's like poking at him for no reason. But yeah. I mean, Blake is calling the shots and instructing these people in what to do and coming up with the plan, and has been instructing these people.
Yeah, well, I mean,
for the past day. And so
Yeah.
it makes sense that he would be like, yeah, you can go, and like give permission. But also he should recognize the fact that like they don't literally have to do what he says.
I think he does. I don't think he is on that much of a trip. I just think he feels a lot of personal responsibility, and he's trying to juggle all this stuff. And so, because I mean, even with the stuff with Rose, I guess I don't know. Like, I feel like the last chapters that we read kind of show that he's extending a lot more of an olive branch than he was before.
He is trying.
He's trying, and I mean, yeah, he did pick his own familiar without her. Granted, that doesn't really affect as many people as summoning a monster, but
sure. But like, what I'm like, it's like she could summon a monster, and being like, no, Rose, I won't let you, will possibly only just push Rose to summon a monster. Like, I'm just saying, like, tactically, I think it'd be good of him to not think of Rose as. I mean, this is sad, but even like to not think of Rose as a partner, or an extension of himself, but to think of Rose as like an independent being who like can do all this shit. Like, I don't think that Blake picking a familiar without Rose was even a bad thing. I mean, I think it sucks insofar that like Evan is now linked to her. When Evan gets her, it hurts her as well. But I think that it was the right choice for Blake. But I also think that it's important for him to be aware that he might easily push Rose to do bad things.
You're not wrong. I mean, I agree with you, but I just think it's funny because I feel like, again, at least the last chapter, maybe 2 chapters before this one, it shows he has been trying, arguably more than she has. I mean, understandably, because she's been through a lot of shit, but I feel like, I don't know. I'm just like, I feel like he's been trying a lot. Probably more
Yeah,
than
I mean, I think
her.
like the whole summoning Midge thing or whatever was great, but basically I wish we had the conversation where before they were setting up, because it sounded like when he wakes up from his dream that he was going to be like, no, Rose, you can't summon anything else, we're done. So I'm curious as to how he got from that sort of thinking to letting it go, but I guess maybe he was thinking along the lines of like, she feels trapped, and if I say no, it's just going to put us like at a worse situation.
Well, I mean, we can kind of get there unless you want to go over that now, but you're talking about like before Isadora became visited.
Yeah.
Frankly, I think it's like, well, we'll get there. We can kind of discuss it there. It tracks, I think, though.
Yeah. And then one thing that I feel like we didn't necessarily learn in Pale, but feels like it makes some sense, is the whole certain objects belong in certain hands thing. Like, stealing something from someone else gives you bad karma. I mean, it feels like the whole your implement's going to come back to you or whatever. But I mean, I guess Musser takes shit from people constantly, but in a way where they're still kind of technically their thing. It's just they've like given custody of it to Musser because he forced them to, and the universe is probably like, that's great. So because the universe sucks. And
yeah,
this also feels like this should bite the Kenneteers in the ass, regarding the power source they stole from Thea. Because Fel seems to be like, even if you were in a fighting laird, like, or Duncan in a battle with Duncan, you still shouldn't have taken his thing.
It might offset that they rescued a bunch of innocents, though.
Maybe. And she did kidnap them.
It could just be like, that was bad karma for her for kidnapping all the innocents and stuff, and kind of evens it out. Maybe.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, because I don't know. This feels like, I mean, I guess the Kenneteers aren't going around stealing things, really. They tend to have a lot of shit and don't need to take things from other people. But on the
Yeah.
other hand, they did take Zed's stuff, and then he agreed to give some of it to them. And they did take the witch hunter stuff. And those to me feel like, yeah, you like won in a battle and they were using these stuff to try to hurt you. But Fel seems to imply like it doesn't matter. And that's interesting.
Well, the witch hunter, I guess Verona did get her stuff back, but I feel like, I mean, originally, like, she had taken, like, they kind of switched bags, right?
Mm-hmm.
Maybe, like, in terms of Bree and Zed, with it kind of, like, being on their turf and stuff. I don't know. But we're just going to have to say that we can't see the Kenneteers karma tracker in real time.
Right.
But, I mean, they have good enough karma in general. It probably doesn't hurt too much to have a couple of these things slip by, but I think they're probably equals out a little bit. We don't have time to go into all that anyway right now, but
sure. It just seems like Fel reacts to it in such a way that I'm surprised that no one's mentioned it yet in Pale.
Yeah, just feel like a lot of it is like coup and claim, you know?
Mm-hmm. That's true.
So it's like maybe if the Kenneteers have been able to like claim it more strongly as theirs, you know?
Mm-hmm.
At least with those things not being implements, at the very least.
Right. Yeah, and then Phil's gonna go home, and they're like, "Oh, are you? What's up with that?" And he's like, "Yeah, I have family." And Blake's like, "Oh, too bad the niece won't be an ally." And I was like, "Wow, you're desperate, but okay, yeah."
Of course he is.
And then thinking about the police station and how like all the Behames work together, it sucks that Conquest champions are like super strong and have allies, whereas Blake's don't, with the possible exception of Fel, and that sucks a lot.
It does suck a lot.
Yeah, and then there's also Isadora who's gonna go like murder him or whatever, but we'll get there. Yeah. Yeah, we talk about the Astrologer. She sounds cool. She summons stuff. I guess she sounds like a shaman, I suppose, that she kind of like makes others using the spirits in the area and light. Something about using lasers and shit to like draw points of light in dark spaces and something and making things. Which is cool, and I'm excited to see that, used against them or whatever. It sucks that the Astrologer was like a potential ally and that she is possibly being forced to work against them.
Yeah. That does suck.
Yeah. But also kind of a cool potential thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, so then we get the whole like fun mic drop before Fel leaves of like so as I see it, the best way to stop Conquest or his champions from killing you or forcing you to surrender is to kill you myself. And Joel freaks out because Joel's still a normal person. And Blake's just like, yeah, you're not wrong. Like, that's fine.
Yeah.
And I guess I'm really surprised that Blake takes this so well. It almost felt like he had like thought of this himself already. Because like thinking about when Joseph left and didn't want to be aware or whatever, and he felt like really betrayed by that. Yeah. And this is and like I guess Joseph was a friend who was with him during a lot of hard times in his life, and he accepts that Fel doesn't like him or whatever. But I as the reader have a lot more empathy toward Fel or whatever. And it's funny that Blake's just like, yeah. Just like if you kill me, make sure you get my soul too. And it's like, okay.
Like, I got you, bro.
It's a lot.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
All right. Blake basically has a really freaking bad nightmare. He ends up waking up and Rose and Evan attempt to comfort him.
Yeah. So far Pact hasn't been that scary. Not in the way I was expecting, I guess. Okay. But this dream was kind of scary. And especially the whole him waking up and like Rose being there and him like freaking out, like that was kind of freaky.
Yeah.
And it was interesting, like the weight of the sword in the book frustrating my attempts to interact with the world. Like it's the demon-y things that he's bound that prevent him from interacting with the rest of the world in a normal way, which is very Diabolist.
Mhm.
It's also interesting to see a dream in a Wildbow work. I don't necessarily remember any from the parahuman stories, which is also something we're not talking about. But in Pale, they tend to be. I mean, I can't think of a time where Alpi wasn't there when we get a dream.
Mhm.
And so it's usually like Alpi's kind of manipulating it, and it's like, gotta talk to you about something, lol. Whereas this is just like, hey, look at Blake's psyche. It's upsetting. And it feels a little bit more dreamy than the first dream we got with Blake in the first chapter of the story, which is interesting. Like less like seeing literal stuff that's happening, and more just like, oh, this is a thing he's really worried about.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'm hoping this doesn't happen. The rose with poos on her shoulder was really like heartbreaking. It did feel like kind of a betrayal, and like Rose sees Blake as an enemy and or a bad gross thing she has to bind or like something. And this role reversal is something that the story seems to be like possibly leaning toward, although hopefully the like option 3 or whatever Blake talks about later can
Mhm.
help. But yeah, this was like scary and sad.
Yeah.
And the first time I was reading it kind of fast, and when he's like, I could see her as she had been in my dream, I like for a second was not clear that he just could still imagine it and not that she was literally like manifesting like that in the mirror. Yeah. But then Evan comes in. Evan's like the best, and the story really needs
Yes.
him just to like break up a lot of the heaviness. Where he like tries to hug Blake with his bird wings, and he's like, this doesn't work. And then he even turns into Ghost Boy to give him a hug, which was like really sweet and really sad.
Yeah.
And Blake's like, oh, does Rose look away because it looks inappropriate? And it's like, no, Blake. Like she looks away because no one can physically touch her unless they're a fairy that's gonna murder her or something like that. Like it's like
Here's the bright side though. If Evan tries to hug her, at least it's going to be the same as with Blake, right?
Yeah, I don't know if Evan could get into the mirror though, so I don't know if like it could even be like visually a thing.
Yeah, he could try, but that's true.
Yeah. But then she goes and she kind of just says like mom and dad never hugged me much.
Yeah.
And throughout the story, most of the time when Rose brings up her parents, it's like they were so much better than your parents, Blake. Like they weren't assholes to me, but this was a moment of just like, yeah, like they still sucked.
Yeah.
And like they were still bad parents. And they still really hurt Rose. And yeah, it's funny where she's like, I'm mad at them for not preparing us for the world. And I'm like, yeah, most of the stuff they didn't prepare you for was stuff that they didn't know existed, though. So
Yeah, that's
it's
a
not
good point.
really their fault.
It's really your grandma's fault.
It's really your grandma's fault.
Yeah. They could have hugged them more, though.
Yeah. But it I don't know. It feels like that made me feel like, I don't know, grandma shaped Rose. And she's sometimes I'm like, Blake, she's you should trust her, but it's like she's not, like she's been altered.
Yeah.
And I guess that would be something that would be scary and something you wouldn't want to trust. And I feel like her outfit was pointed out in this. So like she doesn't really have access to a lot of clothes.
Yeah.
Possibly, but I feel like, I don't know, there's a chance she could go into like random shops and pick out
I think
clothes.
she only has access to certain mirrors, like more ones around Blake and then stuff in the Thorburn house.
Right. Well, but then she also has access in the spirit world, at least to like Blake's friends or whatever, because she's able to go back and forth.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just like funny that she's like wearing Grandma Rose's clothes and she has like a cameo pin, and I was like, what is that? And I googled it.
Oh, go ahead.
Well, I like googled it, and it's one of those like silhouette face pin things. Because I was like, you have a what over your heart? And I'm just like, how do you know what that is called, Blake? Like, what's going on?
Okay, I have a question now for you. So, because you're talking about the clothes, you're talking about how Rose could follow Blake's friends. Which one of Blake's friends did you expect Rose to steal clothes from? And what kind of outfit do you picture Rose wearing? Would it be Alexis? Would it be Tiffany? Would it be Ty? I don't think Fel counts as a friend, but do you think she would steal clothes from him?
Maybe Fel's mom has just some normal shit. Well, the thing is, like, if they're spirit clothes versions, if they're spirit world or mirror world versions of the clothes, like those, she's not literally taking the clothes.
No,
So
I understand. I
they don't-
understand that.
they
But
don't
I'm
need
saying,
those.
like, what do you, out of who of Blake's friends do you think depicts Rose's personality? Like, think of the kind of stuff that Alexis wears.
Sure. I mean, I'm trying to imagine what Tiffany wears, and I feel like
Yeah.
it's
She might be more normal, I guess, in terms of
right.
basic
I mean, the thing is, I feel like the
stuff,
old
but-
lady clothes really suit her.
Yeah.
Because, like, she does not go for Molly's clothes, but she also, like, kind of complains about the old lady clothes, but I think she likes it. It's just funny.
That is kind of funny. That's what.
Yeah.
That's what we're trying to get you to laugh, because isn't Alexis like? I'm trying to pick
Punk
she, like,
rocky.
yeah, like going from an old lady clothes to punk rock clothes. Like, I don't know. That seems funny to me. All right. Do you want me to move on to the next part?
Oh, well, just this last bit they start talking about Maggie.
Mhm.
And one thing that was funny was that Evan was like, or Rose was like, Evan woke Maggie to turn on the TV so he could watch something, and like that's fucking hilarious. And like and he's like, I want to go for a ride on the bike. Like, he's just so funny and I love it.
It's amazing.
But then Blake's kind of like, so who made the wording of the summoning? And Rose says, oh, do you think she's trying to sabotage us? Which is not an answer. But yeah. And she's like, you paid more attention to her than I did. And I'm like, you spent a lot more time with her than Blake did? Like, that's weird. Like, I can't decide if these responses make me sus of Rose or sus of Maggie or like not sus of anyone.
I was going to ask you what your thoughts were on that, but I guess you are undecided. So
I mean, it's hard to trust Rose because of what it seems like she was created for or whatever.
Yeah.
And we know that Maggie is trying to use Blake to create a horrible situation in a contained way. But I still don't think Maggie has changed since he saw her or whatever. I don't know.
Okay. Well, yeah. Well, a story will go on, and we'll see if there's anything to find out, or if it's just kind of Blake is paranoid. Isadora ends up showing up. She promises to attack Blake the next day, and that Rose will take over after he dies. Blake argues back that there may be a third, or even fourth, or fifth option.
I was a little confused as to where they are.
I think they were doing I think they left to do errands or something, if I'm not mistaken.
It's like they got coffee and stuff. They found Tiff and Alexis and Ty. They're not in the garage. They're in an apartment, but it's vacant.
Let me
like maybe it's just that like Blake's shit got it wasn't, there wasn't too much in it, and a lot of his stuff got trashed.
So it's like they hadn't ended up eating at the apartment. They ended up getting Ty, Alexis, and Tiff from their camps in the spirit world. Tiff taking watch near the real world site of the gateway in the garage, stopped for donuts, and then they split up. Maggie and Phil went to the junkyard. And let me see. Yes, as he stood watch standing on the balcony outside the apartment. And a figure landed on the next balcony over.
Yeah, so I'm thinking they're in his apartment. I wasn't sure.
Yeah.
But yeah, once again, Isadora would have eaten me like 7 times during this conversation. Because every time she asked a question, I was like, answer. And then I was like, oh, he's being shady. And it's like, no, he's just, not being eaten. I really like Isadora. I don't love her like obsession with balance.
That's kind of what she is, though, right?
I guess. I mean, it feels like the whole system is balance, right? Like the whole system is karma, and so she feels like she like way plays into the system too much. And I don't like that, but I like her.
Sure.
Yeah, she's like, hostile that might help. I'm gonna fight you. And I'm wondering how it's gonna help. Because I kind of think maybe they'll make it work out in some way. and then helpful that may lead to disaster. Rose is the next heir, and you're gonna die soon. And part of me was like, well, she is immortal, and so maybe soon is in like 50 years.
Yeah.
That said, this book hasn't had a lot of time skips since the action really started, and so I don't know. It feels like Blake is gonna die. Like, I was thinking Blake would die at like the very end of the story or whatever in this big dramatic thing, but it almost feels like he's gonna die like arc 12, and then it's gonna be like the adventures of Ghost Blake in the mirror world, allowing Rose to escape, and him running around being like, "Ah, fuck," or something.
Do you think he's going to be able to hug Evan this time?
Not if he's in the mirror. Sorry. Not if he's in the mirror. But if he's just a ghost, then yeah. But then Congress is going to eat him. Yeah, I think it's interesting the whole, like, Rose will flip stuff, kind of. Like, she'll adopt the ties you have abandoned. Minor people in your life will become major hers. And I was like, oh, so she and Penny are going to be best friends. And Laird's going to leave and go somewhere else. And maybe she'll marry Andy. I'm okay with all of these things.
Okay, Malia. Why would she marry a witch hunter? Who literally wants
because she'll talk to him and she'll listen and understand, and she needs a blackguard. And
yeah, that makes total sense. A witch hunter who goes after terrible others is gonna marry a diabolist.
Maybe she'll never actually summon a demon.
Rose?
I mean, she hasn't yet. It'd be nice.
I mean, sure. Okay, Malia. All right. Yeah, I'm just gonna roll past that. That's cool. All right. Any other things you want to mention about this part?
Yeah, the whole Blake doesn't expect to win. Or he's like, he maybe doesn't expect to win. He was like, what would you say if I told you that? I'm hoping he finds a third way. So far, this story, and Wildbow in general, is good at finding things that I don't anticipate. He's good at finding third ways. The whole third or fourth or fifth made me think of Ty, Alexis, and Tiffany, just because there are three of them and they're somewhat unanticipated, but I also hope they don't get dragged into this too much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I feel like this part with him talking about the third option, and I mean, it kind of says it in the story, that kind of explains why he kind of dropped the whole thing with Rose's summonings, at the next part, because he's basically like, well, they're supposed to accept this or get mad and have a fight or something, because Rose seemed like she was ready to fight. He said something about that, and he was like, whatever, fuck this, I'm gonna take the third option and just let it go.
I think that, yeah, I think the third option is the only way the story is going to go well is if Blake can do unexpected things that aren't just the yes or no choice. I felt like the options were either Blake would win or Rose would win, or, I mean, he doesn't let it go. He decides to distract her and to mislead her that she will also die when he does.
He doesn't say one way or the other, but it's kind of lie by omission.
Right. No, I mean, he obviously can't lie, but he says, I'm sorry, Rose. And he doesn't explain why. And he thinks that Rose thinks that she's going to die when he does. And he's like, was she worried about her own existence? Good. And part of that is yeah, it is good because maybe you guys are going to line and be on the same team, but also this seems shitty, but I get why he doesn't trust her enough to tell her the truth.
Yeah. I mean, you could also argue it was, no, you're totally right, but it was also kind of shitty for her to summon these people without talking to him about it and then act kind of like she's just ready to get into it with him too, I don't, I kind of get why she summoned them, but I don't know. It's
that's kind of why I wish we had that conversation, the conversation in between them waking up and this, because he's just chilling on the balcony and he knows that they're drawing summoning diagrams, and it's did he just not ask? And did he
Or like, did
Because
she say
it's
she was gonna do one, but not like both of
three
them, or three? Yeah,
or
three.
whatever. It looks, what I was assuming was that she had summoned Mary and Tallow-Man or whatever,
And then she
and
was
that
like,
she was waiting for Blake to come back so she could like convince him to let her summon Corvidae.
mm-hmm.
And that's what the fight was going to be about, where she was like ready to like be like, no, you should let me do this, it's going to be great. um and the I'm going to die was like a big distraction from the whole thing. Because yeah, I'm confused as to like, Blake didn't seem to know who she was going to summon. And that seems weird that he didn't ask. I don't
Yeah.
know. Yeah. But Rose summoning things. I So I was confused as to why the 3 baby practitioners needed to draw them, but then she summoned them in the mirror world. Because I was thinking they needed to draw them so she could summon them outside of the mirror world, but no, she like summons them in the mirror world. And so I don't know why she didn't just do it. There is that weird thing where the spirits are like not as present or something in the mirror. Like they don't
Mhm.
hear her as well, even though I don't know. I'm like
Like she has
kinda
the voice,
confused.
but not like
Right.
the physical presence so much.
And like, well, like when she did the awakening ritual, the stuff didn't move around on her side.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I just like didn't quite get that, and I didn't quite get I also just like, it'd be cool. I want to know more about what's in all the books in Grandma's library, cuz maybe there are things that are less scary and horrifying but still like useful and powerful. And like
Mhm.
maybe not. Like maybe the only things that Grandma had or kept notes about were really horrifyingly scary things. But I mean, June and Leonard aren't nearly as scary. And June and Leonard are like on the property, blah blah blah. But
Yeah.
maybe there was, and I mean the other verse is scary, so I'm having a hard time coming up with something like definitely way more chill. But you know,
Mhm.
I'm sure there were things. I mean, I'm not sure. I would hope that there were things, but I don't know.
Mhm. So they all go over the plan again. His friend's still reeling from the news. And Phil kind of goes over the spirit world escape hatch as well.
Yeah. That was fun. The whole like, here's a poster board, it has a diagram on it, like put it on the floor and jump. Like that's sort of fun.
Yes. It's like
Yeah, I guess we'll
portal.
get there, but I don't think he didn't use that yet because he talked to some cops at the end. Anyway,
Mhm.
I feel really bad for his friends, you know, hearing that Blake's gonna die and they all have to kind of like keep it together. Well, it's like, oh, the 2 strangers kind of like that we don't fully trust or something.
Yeah.
And we get to pretend that everything's fine. I think it's cool that Maggie has a mix of Fae and Goblin stuff. It seems like, you know, all of her Fae shit is from Patrick, and the Goblin stuff is from impersonating and subjugating goblins, and that's fun. I was really expecting more of a Goblin Princess vibe in terms of just like, you know, fun and silly and mischievous. And we haven't seen fun and silly and mischievous goblins yet. Like the closest we got was Dick Swizzle, and he was
Mhm.
great, but it wasn't, you know, the wonderful goblins of Pale yet. And I'm
Mhm.
curious as to like if we're gonna get that really in this story much, because she really hates them because of what goblins did to her town. Which, you
Mhm.
know, makes sense. And I guess it makes sense that she wants to understand them, and that's why she kind of like honed in on them as a practice. And
Mhm.
also, they're possibly easier for a beginner or something, like more accessible.
Hmm.
Goblins just like live in the woods and shit, and maybe something. But it also, I don't know. It sucks that she hates them, but she's a goblin practitioner.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of always figured, like, you know, you're gonna pick the thing that you're most scared of, slash, like, you know, try to master it.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I kind of respect that, but also it just, ugh, it sucks.
Yeah, but I mean, yeah, again, most goblins aren't like Toad Swallow, though. You know, in terms of like, you know, easing things for kids and stuff like that as well.
Hmm. Sure. It's just, it seems like the majority of goblins are just like silly and fun and gross. And it sucks that she hasn't necessarily encountered them or something. I don't know.
Do you think it's the majority, or do you think it's just like,
I mean, from how it's talked about in Pale, it seems like there's really fucking scary goblins
Mm-hmm.
that just want to like murder people. There's big strong goblins who have like fought their way to the top.
Uh-huh.
And then there's just like shit tons of like mid to low tier goblins. And a lot of them probably die in the warrens and like don't make it out or whatever. But when there's a big summoning of goblins in Pale, it's like fun and silly and ridiculous. And those seem to be the type that a low level practitioner would have access to. I don't know. It just bums me out because
Yeah.
it's understandable, but it sucks.
Makes sense.
Yeah. And then they talk about the Hames, which is always fun. And they're just like, oh, yes, chronomancy. And it's nice that there's restrictions in the other verse that seem to make sense in terms of like, this is really fucking hard. So you have to like confine it to a particular space. And like the 3 degrees of separation from the people involved is interesting because it really fucks shit up. I thought it was funny that Isadora was like more upset with Duncan and was like, you, Blake, haven't or won't upset the balance as much as that did, which was surprising. But yeah, it just reminds me of Fantasy High, which is a live D&D podcast that the College Humor dropout folks do. It's really good. You should all go listen to it. The first season is available for free on like YouTube and podcast stuff. And the like Dumbledore equivalent or whatever, who's like dotty and ridiculous, like makes some speech at the beginning of the year and it's just like, ah, yes, like the most important magic of all, like what's the most powerful magic or whatever. And people are like, like love and like, all this like, silly cheesy shit. And he's like, no, chronomancy. Like he's just like, chronomancy is the one. And it's just like really funny that it's like, no, you dumbasses. And so whenever I think about chronomancy, I think about Arthur Eggfort and I laugh.
That's funny.
It's pretty great.
So Blake and his friends initiate the plan, and some of them enter the spirit world, and Blake looks at his friends through the sight and sees what they look like.
Yeah, this was really cool. We get this sometimes with like the Kenneteers, I think, in terms of like Lucy's pink hair and different things, but this made me think of how this is how the spirits see these people. The way that you awaken is really important to that, which is why they're all sort of like naked or whatever, because presumably they all awoke naked, which is how most people do it. But Alexis having like, I think like just like totally white eyes is like really cool and creepy, and I don't get it. I'm not sure what about her would lead to that. But like, I don't know, all the tattoos, her molars, that was really fun that they were really like clear because those were her awakening things. With Fel, that like the spirits can see the ways he's altered his suit because that's the practice and that's what's supposed to be happening. His gun is so much of a part of him, and then the powder is such a big thing. And then Maggie was also like the pointed ears, the pointed fingers, like shit has happened to Maggie. I don't know if that's just like a goblins have fucked this person up and she has blood on her hands, and I don't know. But yeah.
Not sure. No guesses.
I just hate this. It's one of those things where it's like, I could probably figure it out, but I can't.
You could see if you could throw a bunch of guesses at it, or,
Nope.
Nope. All right. That's cool. All right. So they end up going to the police station and standing off against the Bahames, getting the creepy Mary lady.
Yeah. So back to the action is fun. I'm wondering if we're ever going to find out what the Stonehenge charm actually does. And it makes sense that the whole Blake destroyed a whole bunch of the books and shit of one of the Bahames came back to bite him. It felt kind of shitty to do, and makes sense that they'd be mad about it, especially, I guess, younger generations who tend to see the world in right and wrong, and also who could really benefit from those books, / maybe they would have been passed down to them. But it's interesting seeing just like more randos and they're in the bathroom, which is always for some reason a fun place to have a fight scene. And I don't know what was going to happen to Blake, where the girl was like, I hereby bespell you. Like, what the fuck does that mean? And Mary's really scary, and she comes out of the mirror, and I'm glad the girl had that protective circle. I'm glad Rose told her not to do any permanent damage, but I still hate it. It went better, she did what Rose said. She came back. It was still scary, and I still hated it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yep, that's scary. Scary. And just
Yeah,
that last,
so
I feel like
hype
that
for a
last
fun
sentence.
fight scene.
She's like, as I passed the mirrors, or the pictures mounted on the wall, Rose walked in step with me, and the Bloody Mary walked in step with her. It's just like, ugh, it's creepy.
Yeah, it's horrifying.
It's creepy.
Yep.
All right.
Don't love it.
I kind of love it. It's kind of wonderful, but creepy. Okay. Pale in comparison section. Let's talk about the level 8 for Maggie. And
what is worse or better? Well, because I was thinking the milkmaid, right?
The milkmaid's pretty bad.
Milkmaid's pretty bad, but she doesn't have quite the scale.
Yeah, it's not quite
the goblins did.
Yeah.
I'm trying to decide, like 6 or 7, 5, 6 or 7. Is she worse than the Splinter or not? Is it worse not knowing whether you had family members or knowing that you did and they were turned into cows?
And then in terms of it happening to you, because we don't really know, it's kind of, we obviously don't know what it's like to be eaten up by the Splinter. So,
sure.
Like, is that worse than being turned into a creepy ass cow? Or is being a cow and worse?
I think no longer existing is better than being a horrifying cow slave thing.
True. But then on the other hand, like, is it better to have people, like, is it better to, like, have nobody remember you and who you are and have no link to the world? Or is it better to, like, have people remember and miss you and just be like, where the hell is my family member? Like, in terms of a larger scale, Yeah. It's pretty horrifying. Yeah. That's for sure.
What about what happened to Chloe?
That's pretty bad. I don't think it's quite as bad as those, to be perfectly honest.
As either of them?
No. It's still really awful. It's really fucking awful. Don't get me wrong. I think
really
it's
bad.
Probably close, but I'd say, I don't know, maybe a 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm. Well, if the Splinter's a 6.
Mm-hmm. Well, I haven't decided if I think that. I still think there's
the milkmaid's worse.
Yeah. And I feel like there's probably slightly different levels of 6s. I think you could go decimal.
That's fair.
So
yeah, no, Chloe was really bad.
Chloe was pretty bad, but I think Milkmaid's worse than that because you lose all autonomy and everything. Even though they both get turned into monsters in a sense. Like the creepy cow thing's worse because you're basically like a slave and a cow. Yeah, that's worse.
It's so bad.
The Splinter, that's a hard one. I feel like I probably would rather disappear forever than become a creepy cow. But we also don't really know what the scale of is the Splinter. Because we say it's small. But was it small? Or do we just not remember there being a big town around there?
That's true.
The Splinter's harder to, like...
figure out, yeah.
Harder to figure out, but also, like... I think it'd be easier to bind the milkmaid.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But again, it's really hard without knowing what it feels like to get disappeared.
Yeah. What about the brownies? I feel like how bad is what happened to Bristol?
That seems pretty bad.
I guess I'm not sure on details. Yeah. It's like they won't kill you. They torture
just like torture.
You. He like agreed to it, like
because he's a prideful dumbass,
right? So like individually on that level, but like if the brownies come after you in general, sucks. But also their scale is again not a whole town or whatever. It's individual, and
it's not always that bad. Like if it had been like 3 weeks since someone said please or thank you, it wouldn't have been that bad.
Right.
So I think in general that's not as bad.
It feels like if you have brownies working for you, I mean, maybe they get pissed off and leave eventually, but just like people should take turns, and at the end of every day, someone says like thanks, and then has to deal with like, something that kind of sucks.
But then the bad thing about that is if someone forgets to say thanks, then the next person has to deal with like even more. And then, it's like...
That's true.
Unless you just get someone like Charles or Seth and just be like, Seth, you have to go in and say thank you every week. Okay? You're the forsworn one. This is what you got to do.
Yeah, wait, okay, being forsworn. Where is that on this list?
That's pretty bad. Because granted, the forsworn that we've seen have got it a lot fucking better than most other forsworn.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think though that there's something about, so like Maggie's thing, Chloe's thing, the milkmaid, none of those are like you went into this knowing that there were consequences,
Yeah.
Like the brownies being forsworn.
Worse, yeah.
Those are all like
consequences to your actions, whether or not really justified. Like,
right. And hopefully you knew the rules and basically that there were these consequences before you signed up for it.
Yeah.
And so those feel different on the level of just like complete awfulness.
That's the thing. Like the broad spectrum of like shitty things that there are just in the world in general, not to mention the fucking practice, like the other verse. Like using a scale from 1 to 10, you have to have a shitload of decimal points in there because like there's just too many things. There's too many fucking things. Like,
yeah,
it's impossible. And like saying that something's a 5 or a 6, like not all 5s are going to be equal. Not all 6s are going to be equal because there's too many fucking things. You know what I mean?
True. Yeah.
So like, yeah, saying 8 out of 10, they should have been like 800 out of 1,000 at least in terms of that scale, because it's just too hard to like narrow it down.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I feel like that's a fair discussion question if anyone wants to just like weigh in.
Yeah, I think that's fun.
Cool. All right, we'll come back to that, but for now, we're gonna go to our favorite spot, Malia's bold and specific prediction section.
Woo!
All right, so what is your prediction for this week?
My prediction. It's fun when my predictions build off of my other predictions that might be wrong. My prediction is that the Astrologer and Johannes are connected somehow. That maybe they like had the same sort of person teach them, or they're working together, or something. A weird amount of people in Toronto seem to have ties back to Jacob's Bell, and I kind of think that maybe the Astrologer likes Blake, or is kind of on Blake's side, in part because of Johannes. Yeah.
Sorry, I just realized I had to add something into the bottom. Okay, cool. Sounds good. Any other weird predictions about, I don't know, Blake being filled with spirits that are making him paranoid, or Maggie like being covered in spirit blood, or anything like that?
No, I don't know. The blood thing with Maggie seems like it could be a Molly thing, and could be like it's her fate or whatever, because the Goblin Lady. I don't know.
Okay. Do you think that, what about Blake in terms of like getting attacked by Isadora?
Maybe she'll do it in a way that would also kind of fuck over people who might also be attacking Blake at the same time, but then I feel like she'd just attack the police station, so I don't know.
Wouldn't it be funny if she like knew straight up that like she was gonna attack him, but like in a really like harmless way, like I'm attacking you with like fucking Nerf gun, and then she just knew that like he was gonna die like from something totally unrelated, like that same,
That would be funny.
That would be funny.
Yeah. She does seem to want Blake to stop existing, so yeah.
All right. Well, we're going to move on to our previous discussion question section, which was based on your profession, what would your practice be? And this one we got a fuckload of answers, which is great.
Yeah.
But because of that, we ain't going to talk about them all because there's a lot. So
yeah, we just picked out a couple.
We picked out
some
like
of them
5.
Also, I don't know what your jobs are, so sorry if we describe them poorly.
Yeah. I mean, Yeah. So we picked out 5. The first one is just really fitting. Minnow. They don't say what their job is, or they don't say what their practice would be. They just said, based on the demographic of people who listen to this podcast and read these stories, they're going to guess technomancer for most people, which
they'd be right.
they were fucking right. First person, me Issy one. I still don't know if I'm pronouncing your name right, but that's cool. Macy one, me Issy one, you. We've heard from you before. Immediately says technomancy. Immediately. So they said less of someone like Zed, who's a bit more on the business side, and more like the guy we heard about in Ray's backstory, who made his own realm and got lost in it. So, and also said it might be kind of pathy. So they said specifically for them, their job, let me see, it would map to a realms-oriented technomancer who has built and connected their realm to the past and is using it to go out and venture into the past while also solidifying some technomantic practices before handing them off as they start to gain traction.
Cool. So Sengachi works with quantum computing and quantum optics, and I definitely know what that means.
Yeah, no fucking clue. But it sounds complicated.
Yes. So they would do some sort of niche practice that requires you to develop an intuition for seeing the world in extremely non-intuitive ways, which sounds really useful for the practice. Maybe using alchemy to distill faith and godhood, or highly abstract elemental warding. Cool.
I feel like I remember when I was reading theirs, they said specifically, like, based on their job, they probably wouldn't even know what kind of practice they were going to have. Because it's just like so,
niche.
Next, we have Code Zeta. They say that they're a process engineer for a flow line / riser pipe manufacturer, which I guess is oil rig stuff. They can safely say they would be a huge dabbler. So the first, they say elementalism, enchanting magic, and they do admit technomancy. So they're saying, they say technomancy because fuck pivot tables and 12K rows, Excel spreadsheets, and power automate not automating things the way I want them to. I don't know what all that means, but I can just feel that in my soul. Like, I understand. Like, fuck that. Fuck all that shit.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, hell, I probably want to add technomancy to my job, too, because even though I'm not technically, like, very technically literate, fucking, like, computerized charting is a pain in the ass sometimes. It does not work all the time how it should. But anyway.
Lawyers are historically Luddites. Kind of. We don't advance with time. Most lawyers still have fax machines that they use.
Hey, we have fax machines too at our hospital.
Yeah, electronic filing is like kind of a new big deal, which is hilarious. So, I probably wouldn't have to do technomancy, even though it's probably fun.
Random thing, Malia. Did you know that apparently our dad's doctor still has fucking paper charting? Because that's what my mom told me. So,
did he get some sort of exemption because he's old?
I don't know. I haven't talked to him.
So I thought they all had to do.
They were supposed to, like a long time ago. But
that's so funny.
I guess he was just like, "Fuck it, I'm gonna keep doing my paper charts."
That's what I always picture is like seeing stacks and stacks of paper charts on Dad's desk when people talk about charting.
Yeah, it's a pain in the ass. At least can be. At least when it's not working properly or something's hard to find. And I'm sure all the techie people think it's really fucking intuitive. It ain't. Okay. Like, I understand there's probably a difference, like, in how your mind has to work if you're medical, or probably even if you're a lawyer or whatever. But, like, some of that shit just does not work well. But yeah, I will admit we have one of the better electronic, like, charting systems at our hospital, I think, than a lot of other places have.
Nice.
I'll let you read the last one.
Yeah, so last but not least, Beleg Tall says technomancer. But then they're like, well, working in networking, I literally manipulate connections for a living. So also maybe an enchanter / enchantress. Yeah. That sounds kind of more fun, but
it does.
Yeah.
Thank you for your answer to everyone. And for everyone we didn't mention, I'm sorry. We had too
Yeah.
many people, but feel free to
Go
go on
check out-
Reddit or
Yeah.
Discord
Yeah.
to read those answers.
So they were all pretty interesting, but also I was like, I don't know what y'all do with your lives.
Yeah, like it's all going over my head too much. But so this week's discussion question, basically we're kind of going, I guess, off of what we were talking before. Pale in comparison. Trying to think of what we were saying. Feel free to tell us your rating system for some of the things that have gone on. Just discuss, I don't know, Maggie's 8 out of 10. And feel free to pick some things and talk about them. Or not. You know, it's fine. We're just, you know, I'm going to read what Malia's typing because it actually is more legible than what I just tried to say. Pick some events described in Pale and rate them on the 1 to 10 badness scale. 8 is the destruction of Maggie's town. 6 is the Splinter, or Splinter, as Malia typed.
Oops.
As a typo.
And
I tried to help by adding an L, so it says
Splinter.
So, all right. Perfect.
We did it.
We did it. All right. Thank you for listening, everyone. If you enjoyed this episode and you'd like to help support the podcast, please subscribe, share it with your friends, and leave a rating and review. To help support our podcast, go to patreon.com/doofmedia. And if you'd like to support Wildbow as he continues to write fantastic stories, go to patreon.com/wildbow.
You can follow the pod on Twitter at Pale Comparison, or send us an email at paleincomparisonpod@gmail.com. Keep an eye out for our Reddit thread in r/parahumans, where you can answer our discussion question and share your thoughts on this episode. In addition, if you would like to see all of my predictions laid out, check out our episode description for a link to a prediction tracker. Next episode, we will be covering... Oh, wow.
Add an extra chapter on there because I figured we could just stick it in there.
I'm shocked. We're covering chapters 6.11, 6.12, and histories.
What?
Arc
Long
6.
episode.
That's so intense.
It's intense. We're going to make it
I'm curious
work.
as to why Jenny did this.
Well, you'll see when we read it. You know, it fits in together. I've got a fun fact for you, which I'm not going to explain. It's because it's just weird. Fun fact. The U.S. government has a stockpile of 1.4 billion pounds of cheese stored in underground caves in Missouri. I'm sure it's for a perfectly good reason.
This reminds me of this episode of Criminal that I didn't actually listen to all the way that involves like a really intense scavenger hunt that this author made. And I want to do a scavenger hunt for the cheese. It's like the rat race.
It probably doesn't taste good, but I mean,
That's
I guess
don't say that.
I mean, maybe it's good. Maybe being underground in a Missourian cave is what it needs to give that extra depth of flavor.
I mean, they probably wrapped it in plastic wrap or something.
Yeah, plastic wrap is all you need. That's all you need, and it's going to be delicious forever. Have a good one.
Bye!
Bye! Hey, this is the live read of 6.11. If you don't want spoilers, don't listen past here. Before you stop recording, let's just try to just do this, because I just want to try it. And then you can just, like, cut it out at the end if it doesn't work. Is that okay?
Okay. How long do you think it'll take me to read a chapter? Because I think the Super Bowl starts in 15 minutes.
I think it's... Let's just try it. Let's just see what we can get through. Because this is kind of like a test.
So, what the fuck?
What are you talking? Okay, so first we're starting. We're going to be trying to do a live reaction to Subordination 6.11.
Does 6.11 not exist?
What are you talking about?
6.11 doesn't exist!
What are you talking about? Oh, you can't find it?
Why would you do this? Wow, what the fuck's going on?
What do you mean? I think your computer's glitching. What are you talking about?
No, it's not!
What?
I've clicked through to it 15 ways.
Did you try to go off the main menu?
Yes!
Okay, what happens?
What the fuck? Did it get eaten?
Well,
Okay,
I will say...
Wait. Okay. So when I click next chapter, it goes from 6.10, it goes to 6.12. And at the top it says Category Archive 6.11. And there's this little folder symbol and it says 6.11, comma, 6.12. And when I click last chapter, it goes back to 6.10. And when I go down and I click 6.11, it goes to 6.12. Can I click the next button on 6.12 to see where it goes?
Sure.
Does it go to 6.11?
No,
it goes to history. What the fuck? If I click 6.12, it goes to 6.12. I hate this. What the fuck is going on?
I love this. That's so great. So, just as a reminder where we were, just to give you a hint. So, this is what apparently happened when this was released, and well, they're fighting the Behames, right? As you said, chronomancy.
It's the most powerful form of magic.
It is. So
powerful. Maybe Blake beat them and they restarted it, and so we don't get 6.11. But we got 6.11 when Duncan restarted it. This just feels like the Splinter. It ate 6.11.
Yeah, except that they weren't by the
near
Splinter,
the Splinter at all.
So I'm pretty sure it's a time thing. Pretty sure it's a time thing. And yes, that is exactly what I wanted to get your reaction for. So, yes.
So it's like, I don't have time for this.
You actually do. You have time for it because it's not there.
Hurts.
That was pretty funny.
I bet 6.12. No, I bet 6.x is a Bahame thing. I bet it's layered.
All right. Well, you're just gonna have to read and find out.
Okay,
but yeah,
that's
I
my
figured
guess.
6.12 and histories would probably be good to do next week. So.
Cool.
I know. I was trying to fit in the 6.11 thing, but you clicked too fast. I was like, damn it.
I was like, let's go and read it. And I was like, it's broken, Wildbow. Why did you break it?
Yeah.
How has no one fixed these links in
yeah,
7 years?
Know that it's not working?
No one's mentioned it.
That was funny. All right. Have a good Super Bowl.
Thanks. Bye.
All right. Bye.